Miriam Foster stood by the large bay window of her Victorian home, the Willow Estate, overlooking the sprawling gardens that her late husband, Thomas, had so carefully cultivated. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the land. To her, this house wasn't just a building, it was a lifetime of memories. It was where she had raised Adam, where she and Thomas had grown old together, and where his memory still lingered in every corner, every creaking floorboard. At 68, Miriam had grown used to the silence of the estate. After Thomas passed away 5 years ago, it had become her refuge, a place where she could retreat into the past and find solace in the quiet beauty of the land. She wasn't lonely, not truly. She had her books, her garden, and the occasional visits from Adam. Or, at least, she used to. Miriam turned as she heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Adam had arrived with his new wife, Serena. Miriam braced herself. It had been several months since Adam last visited, and she could already feel the tension building in the air. Adam, now 45, walked through the door with his usual confident stride, dressed in an impeccable suit that screamed success. His appearance was always polished, the mark of a man who had made it in the world. Behind him was Serena, his new wife, a striking woman in her early 30s, with platinum blonde hair and a manicured smile. Miriam had never quite warmed to Serena, and the feeling was mutual. "Mom, it's so good to see you," Adam said, offering a tight hug that didn't quite reach his eyes. Miriam forced a smile as she returned the gesture. "Hello, Adam, Serena," Miriam replied, her voice steady but cool. "What brings you two out this way?" Adam's smile faltered, and before Miriam could sit down, he spoke, his voice carrying a tone she knew all too well, the tone of someone who was about to make a demand. "Mom, we need to talk about the estate," Adam said, settling into an armchair with an air of authority. Miriam's heart skipped. The last time Adam had visited, there had been subtle hints about selling the estate, but she had brushed it off. Now, it seemed the conversation was about to get serious. "What about the estate?" Miriam asked, trying to sound casual. "Well," Adam began, adjusting his tie, "Serena and I have been talking, and we really think it's time you sold the property." Miriam's stomach tightened. The words felt like a punch, but she refused to let her surprise show. "Sold it," she repeated. "Why would I sell this house?" Serena, ever the opportunist, chimed in, her voice soft but laced with a calculated sweetness. "It's too big for you now, Miriam. You're here by yourself. The market is really hot, and you don't need all this space anymore. The money could go toward something that benefits everyone." Adam nodded, his expression almost patronizing. "We could take the cash and finally get the car we've been wanting. A Porsche, maybe. Serena's been eyeing one for a while. You don't need the estate. You've got the apartment in the city. It's just sitting here collecting dust." Miriam's chest tightened at his words. The Willow Estate wasn't just a house, it was her home. It was where Thomas had poured his heart and soul into every corner. It was where they had raised Adam, where they had shared their dreams, and where, after his passing, Miriam found peace in the memories they had created together. "Miriam, this house isn't just a property, Adam. It's where I spent my life with your father. It's where I scattered his ashes. I'm not selling it for a car or a vacation." Serena's eyes narrowed as she looked at Miriam, clearly unfazed by the emotional weight Miriam had placed on the house. "You won't even have time to enjoy the money, Miriam. You're getting older. You could use the funds now for something that makes sense for the both of you." Adam leaned forward, his tone turning sharper. "Mom, I'm just being practical. You don't need this place. It's a liability now. We could use the cash to build our future together." Miriam's hands tightened around her coffee mug. She could feel the anger rising in her chest, but she knew she had to stay calm. "This house stays in the family, Adam," she said firmly. Adam shot her an incredulous look. "What family, Mom? You and me. You're living here alone. No one else wants it. Serena and I have big plans, and this money could help us get there. The house is just sitting here, not doing anyone any good." Serena, who had been tapping away on her phone, finally spoke up. "The house is worth at least $400,000. That's enough for the car, a vacation, maybe even some upgrades to our lifestyle. You've had your time with it, Miriam. Let us have ours." Miriam stood up slowly, her knees protesting the movement, but her resolve strengthening with each passing second. She wasn't about to let them manipulate her into selling the estate. This house represented everything she had with Thomas, everything that defined her. She wouldn't let them take it from her. "Miriam, I'm not selling the estate, not to buy a car or for anyone's vacation fund. This house stays with me." Adam's face hardened. His patience had worn thin. He stood up, his voice rising. "You're being ridiculous, Mom. What are you going to do with all this space? You're living in the city now. You won't even have time to enjoy it." Serena glanced at her phone, clearly irritated, but Miriam could feel the sting of her words. At her age, she was supposed to quietly fade into the background and give up her possessions for the younger generation to enjoy. They didn't see the value in her memories, in her life's work. "Don't talk to me like I'm some inconvenience, Adam," Miriam said quietly, her voice steady. "This house is mine. It's where I raised you. It's where I lived with your father, and I'll be damned if I let you sell it for your wife's sports car." Adam opened his mouth to argue, but Miriam held up a hand, silencing him. "Miriam, the house stays. End of discussion." Adam's expression soured, and after a tense silence, he turned on his heel and walked out. Serena followed, casting Miriam one last glance before the door slammed shut behind them. Miriam stood in the empty house, the echoes of their departure ringing in her ears. Their words had hurt, but they also ignited something inside her. She wasn't going to let them take her home, her memories. She would fight for this place, for her legacy, even if it meant standing alone. As she sat down in the quiet of the living room, the weight of her decision settled on her shoulders. She had to make sure the house stayed in the family, but it was going to take more than just saying no. Miriam knew she had to be strategic, and she would be. This was just the beginning. After Adam and Serena left, Miriam stood still in the entryway, the weight of their words hanging in the air. The front door had barely closed behind them when a surge of anger welled up in her chest. How dare they treat her like this? How dare they think she was just some old woman who could be pushed aside for their own gain? The more she thought about their demands, the more the decision to stand her ground became clearer. She moved slowly to the kitchen, her heart pounding as she put the kettle on for tea. It was only then, as she waited for the water to boil, that the full realization of her situation hit her. Adam wasn't just asking her to sell the estate. He was treating her as though her life had no value, as though her memories, her history, were nothing but a nuisance. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of her reverie. It was a message from Riley McCarthy, an old friend and a retired attorney who had helped her with various legal matters over the years. Miriam's heart lifted slightly. Riley was someone she could trust. He had always been there when she needed him, and she knew he would understand the situation. She quickly typed out a message. "Miriam, Riley, I need your help. Adam is demanding that I sell the estate, and I refuse. I want to make sure my wishes are protected. Can we talk?" Almost immediately, the phone buzzed again. "Riley, of course. How about we meet tomorrow at the cafe on Maple? I'll make time." Miriam felt a small sense of relief. Tomorrow, she would take action. She wasn't going to let her son, her only child, manipulate her. The Willow Estate would not be sold. Not for a Porsche. Not for a vacation. It was time to protect her legacy. The next morning, Miriam drove to Maple Street Cafe, a cozy spot she'd visited for years. Riley was already seated by the window, his gray hair neatly combed, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he read through a stack of papers. Despite his age, Riley had lost none of his sharpness. Miriam slid into the chair across from him, and Riley greeted her with a warm smile. Riley. Miriam, good to see you. What's on your mind? Miriam. I need your help, Riley. Adam and his wife, Serena, want me to sell the estate. They're demanding it. The house, it's everything to me. It was Thomas's dream. I won't let them take it. Riley listened quietly, his fingers tapping thoughtfully on the table as Miriam spoke. When she finished, he sighed and set the papers aside. Riley, I thought this might be coming. Adam's always been a bit entitled, hasn't he? But this is about more than just money, Miriam. This is about your rights, your future, and your legacy. You don't need to sell that estate, not unless you want to. Miriam, I don't want to, but I need to make sure I'm protected. I want to leave the estate to someone who will respect it, not sell it for luxury cars and vacations. I've been thinking about it, and I want to sell it privately. Riley, privately, you say? He raised an eyebrow. I assume you don't want Adam to find out, right? Miriam, exactly. I've been planning this for a while. I don't want him to know, and I need to make sure it's legally binding. I'm thinking of selling it to someone who will preserve its history, someone who appreciates it for what it is. Riley leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. Miriam could see him weighing the situation carefully. Riley, you know, there's a buyer I could contact. A woman named Clara Lawson. She's been looking for a property just like this, wealthy with a passion for preserving historic homes. I've worked with her in the past, and I trust her. If you want, I can arrange for the sale to go through her discreetly. Miriam, that sounds perfect. Can you make sure it's completely private? Riley, absolutely. We'll keep it under the radar. I'll arrange for all the paperwork to be in order, and we'll make sure Adam and Serena don't have a clue. Miriam's heart eased a little. She was taking control of her own fate. She wouldn't be swayed by their greed or manipulated by their demands. This was her life, her legacy, and she wasn't going to let them take it away. The next day, Miriam found herself walking through the grand old house she and Thomas had built together. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the empty hallways, and the memories flooded back. Times spent with Thomas on this very land, watching their son grow up and creating a life together. She paused at the old oak door that led to the study, where Thomas had spent hours sketching designs for homes all over the country. Miriam ran her hand across the old wood, feeling the familiar grain beneath her fingers. It felt like a part of her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Riley. Clara Lawson has agreed to the purchase. We'll close the deal quietly. Miriam smiled to herself. It was happening. The house would stay in the right hands, and she could finally be at peace, knowing that the Willow Estate would be cared for and respected. It wasn't just about selling a property. It was about securing her future and reclaiming control of her life. That evening, after the deal was set in motion, Miriam sat down in the living room, the fireplace crackling softly. She allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had done the right thing. She had stood up for herself, for her memories, and for her legacy. The Willow Estate was no longer just a place to live. It was a symbol of her independence, her strength, and her refusal to let her son or anyone else dictate her life. As the fire flickered, Miriam's thoughts turned to Adam. He would be angry, but he would have to learn, just like everyone else, that her decisions were hers to make. He couldn't take her home, her history, or her life. Not anymore. The days following Miriam's decision felt both surreal and liberating. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom. The estate, the memories, and her future were no longer at the mercy of Adam's demands. She could breathe easier, knowing she had made the right choice. But as much as she tried to find peace in her decision, she couldn't help but wonder how Adam would react once he found out. The phone calls and text messages came quickly, just as she had anticipated. The first was a message from Serena, sent in the early morning hours. Serena, Miriam, have you made a decision about the house yet? Adam is worried about you. Please let us know if you've changed your mind. Miriam couldn't help but chuckle bitterly at the message. Serena, with her polished exterior, was clearly just as interested in the sale of the estate as Adam was. But Miriam knew better than to fall for the sweet words that masked their true intentions. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she moved to the kitchen and began preparing her breakfast, letting the silence settle around her. She had made her decision, and now it was time to face the consequences. Later that afternoon, as Miriam sat in the parlor reading a book, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Adam, and he was exactly on time as she knew he would be. Adam barged into the house, his expression stormy and impatient. He was no longer the polished businessman she had known, but a man desperate to get his way. His eyes locked on her as he stepped inside, and the words came out in a rush. Adam, Mom, what the hell have you done? You sold the house without telling me, without even consulting me. You know this was supposed to be mine. The property was always going to be my inheritance. Why would you do this? Miriam didn't flinch. She had steeled herself for this moment. She stood up from her chair slowly and faced her son, her voice calm but resolute. Miriam, you've had your chance, Adam. You and Serena have pushed me for years, trying to manipulate me into giving up the estate, but this is not about inheritance. This house is my home, my legacy. I've lived here with your father, and it will remain with someone who appreciates what it represents. Adam, you don't get it, do you? This wasn't just about the house. You're selfish, Miriam. All we wanted was to start over, to build a life, and you're holding us back. Do you really think you'll have time to enjoy the money? You won't even live long enough to see it. Miriam's heart tightened, but she stood firm. She had heard these words before, just not from her own son. This was no longer about the house or money. It was about something deeper, the disrespect and entitlement Adam had learned to wield against her. Miriam, no, Adam, you've mistaken my kindness for weakness for too long. I've given enough, and I've made my choice. The house has been sold to someone who will respect its history. It's no longer your concern. Adam's face turned pale, and for a moment Miriam saw the anger twist into something darker, a realization that he had lost control. He paced the room, his hands shaking as he muttered under his breath. Adam, who bought it then? Who did you sell it to? You have no right to make these decisions alone. I'm your son, and Miriam, I've already sold it. Adam, it's a private matter. I won't tell you who bought it. I don't owe you that answer. Adam's face contorted in disbelief, his frustration palpable. He took a step toward her, but Miriam held her ground. Adam, you're not being reasonable. I'm your son. This was supposed to stay in the family. I should be the one to have it. Why would you sell it to some stranger? Miriam, because it was never about you, Adam. It was about what's right for me. I'm not going to let you turn this house into something that serves your personal interests. I want it to stay a place of love and memory, not a bargaining chip. Adam's anger finally reached its peak. He clenched his fists at his sides, his voice rising to a furious shout. Adam, I can't believe you've done this to me, Mom. I can't believe you're betraying your own son. This isn't over. I will find out who bought it. I'll get the house back, no matter what it takes. He turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him with a force that made the walls shake. Miriam stood in the middle of the room, her breath shallow, the silence heavy in the air. She had expected this. She had known that Adam would react this way, but now that it had happened, she felt no regret. A week later. It wasn't long before Adam's calls began. Miriam ignored the first few, but they kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. He wanted to talk, he wanted to meet, he wanted answers. Miriam resisted the urge to pick up the phone. She knew that giving in now would be a mistake. This was not a negotiation. She had made her decision, and Adam needed to understand that. One afternoon, as she sat by the fire reading, her phone rang again. It was Adam. Miriam hesitated for only a moment before answering. Miriam, yes. Adam breathing heavily, frustrated. I know you sold it, Mom. I know you did it behind my back. What kind of person does that, who sells a family home without telling the family? Miriam, I did what was right for me, Adam. I've told you this before. It's my decision to make. Adam, you're wrong. You think this is over. You've made a huge mistake. I'm coming to the house. I'll find out who bought it, and I'll make them understand how wrong they are. Miriam knew this would come next. He would try to track down the buyer. He would try to bully whoever it was into selling the house back to him. But he wouldn't succeed. The sale was final, and Miriam had made sure that every legal aspect was secure. Miriam, you can try, Adam, but the house has a new owner, and you have no claim to it. It's over. There was a long pause on the line. Miriam could almost feel Adam's anger pulsating through the phone. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Adam, this isn't over, Mom. I'm going to get that house back, and when I do, you'll regret this. Miriam hung up the phone and set it down slowly. She had no idea how far Adam would go in his desperation, but one thing was certain, she would not be intimidated. Not anymore. The camera pans across the serene, still waters of the river that runs through Willow Estate, reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. The old Victorian house stands tall in the background, a symbol of Miriam's strength and resolve. The garden, once filled with memories of a bygone era, now seems more alive than ever, with vibrant flowers blooming around the meticulously maintained grounds. Inside the house, Miriam stands by the window, looking out at the familiar landscape, Thomas's legacy, her legacy. Her hands are folded calmly in front of her, her face a mixture of determination and peace. She takes a deep breath, the weight of her decisions and the uncertainty of what comes next settling in her chest. She hears a faint knock on the door. Miriam's expression remains unshaken. She walks slowly to the door and opens it, revealing Adam standing there, a shadow of his former self, disheveled, eyes wild with frustration. Adam, Mom, you don't understand what you've done. I'm not going to let you do this to me. Not this time. For a brief moment, their eyes lock, mother and son, two people bound by blood but separated by more than just space. There's a brief flicker of sadness in Miriam's eyes, but she quickly masks it with the calmness she's learned to embrace. Miriam, softly but firmly, No, Adam, you don't understand. I've been making decisions for you and for this family for too long. This time, I'm making a decision for me. The camera pulls back slowly, showing Miriam standing strong in the doorway as Adam stands on the other side, helpless and lost. The light from the setting sun bathes the scene in warm tones, contrasting with the coldness of their strained relationship. Miriam closes the door gently, the soft click of the latch echoing through the house. She walks back into the living room, her steps steady. As she sits in her favorite armchair by the fire, the camera lingers on her face, calm and resolute. She knows what's ahead, but for the first time in years, she doesn't feel afraid. The screen fades to black as the final shot captures the glow of the fire flickering in the hearth, a symbol of the warmth she's reclaiming and the power she now holds over her own life.